And so we're in chapters 9 through 12 of visioneering. And so you covered quite a bit of different stuff in this chapter, and was kind of pleased that he included some personal vision casting. I thought that was interesting. So let's just kind of walk through the chapter. I'll start with Greg. Greg, talk to me about chapter 9, the power of vision.
Well, I thought when he opened it up by the comment there that treat people as if what they ought to be and help them become what they're capable of becoming. And I think he really expressed that just a few lines into this chapter when he said the majority of the visions you cast will be centered on other people and their futures. A couple of the notes that I had on this, as he goes along and he talks about the vision and everything, and he's going to get into the words that we're going to use, and they're going to point people in a direction. We're going to be planting mental seeds, and words can break the self-image of whoever you're talking to. And I think about this when he referred to the father, when he's, as a father talking, and his son knows about his father always talking about casting that vision for his son. I thought, man, my dad did that for me so much in guiding me. And he goes on, and he says, personally, all of us are impacted by the visions people intentionally or unintentionally cast for us. And this was really true, and he used that basketball coach theory on that in the coach casting a vision, that his words with combining events in a picture for him for years to overcome. And when he used that, though, I was looking at that and I thought, yeah, okay, maybe you're not going to be that athlete, but that's also, God was already working behind the scenes, as we've discovered in previous chapters. And here his own personal dad was raising him up to be a godly man. And he looked at this as if, well, I'm never going to have that athletic situation. But that really wasn't what God, I think, was designing this man, just as we see now that he's gone on. And because he says, such are the power of words, such is the power of vision casting, I think his dad's words and power were overshadowing what this coach had done. And he goes on, and that's a little later in the chapter, he talks about his dad, or a little bit later. Jesus did it with Peter and changing of the names, and Jesus was catching a vision of what Peter could become and should become. And it wasn't so much a name change, as Stanley says here. It was more of a vision for it. And it was clear that God had something special for him in mind down the line. And I think this is true with every single one of us. He did give some biblical references, Abraham and Sarah, about that. And I thought, a lot of times things happen in our lives that we don't see happening. And I saw so much in my parents, as I remember them always taking me to church, and my mom and all this talking. And we don't see that particular thing, but what they did was they impacted me, and they cast a vision for me. And I thought, this is really true. And so it kind of hit me heartwarming in that aspect, that your father's words, your mother's words, and all this, and even words as leaders, as you go on and talk, how it can be so powerful. And so we need to be very understanding of what we're saying all the time and how we approach it. And so it was kind of that part was a good thing, actually a real good thing. As I continue on,
well, let me interject and ask a couple questions here.
Sure.
So some of the notes I wrote down. What is the difference between vision and manipulation? What is the difference between?
I think
vision and positive mental chatter.
Okay, vision and manipulation.
Yeah.
Vision and manipulation, I think, when you're casting a vision for people or people that are around you or family or whatever that case is, it is for them, and it is for I think it's a God-ordained vision for them. And it's for the uplifting and lifting up of them and encouragement. Manipulation would be for like your own personal gain.
Yeah.
You're moving people to do something for your personal gain instead of their personal gain. And the second one was, you said?
The difference between vision and positive mental chatter.
Well, that's just what it would be, just chatter. It's just words that are empty words. The vision is something that, and I truly believe this, it is something from God, and it's going to speak, and it's going to touch the heart and the mind.
Yeah. So I'm a sarcastic and what else goes on with sarcastic person? I think I'm well, it's not coming to me, but anyway, I've had people do this to me, and so when I read this chapter, those are the cautions that came to mind. I think the chapter is great. I think the book is fine. I would have recommended it otherwise, but nonetheless, there's some things that always kind of catch me, and I respond to them. So I've had people walk up to me and give me a personal vision from their perspective. And, you know, depending on what circles you run in, this is the non-charismatic equivalent of the Lord has a word for me, for you that he gave me. And I sometimes just kind of look at somebody and go, you know, that's just basically BS. I mean, you're just talking right now, and because you like to talk. And I think sometimes as leaders, we might fall into that trap of you know, sometimes just projecting onto people. I don't have a problem with you know, talking positively. I think we really do need to talk positively to our children. But it was funny to me. I laughed when his kid called him on his comment to him, you know, like, well, what is your special thing, Dad?
Yeah.
And it was almost like, it's almost like there's a sense in which I, as leaders, we need to be careful with this thing, because I think it's very powerful. I think it's evident that it's very powerful just from the standpoint that his dad gave him a generic statement about how God would use him in the future. And the reason I reacted to that is because I've heard that from people in varying forms. You know, that typically is how the prophecy or the vision comes. You know, God has something big for you, or God is going to use you in a remarkable way. And, you know, there's at one level, I like affirming talk. At another level, as a leader, I want to make sure that I'm not just picking a big idea or affirming talk and saying this is God's vision without any reference point to actually being God's vision. You know, so I think that's the challenge with vision, and he touched on it in a different couple places later when he talks about the distinction between your plans and God's vision. I think that's a great distinction when you have a clear vision, but I also think it's a great distinction when you're trying to assess a vision. So I reacted to that, and because there is power there. I mean, my mom gave me a statement, God bless her. I don't think she intended it for it to chase me my whole life. She was just being a good parent at the time. But she called me out as a teen on being lazy. She used that word, you're lazy. And I just went, you know, from then on, if you call me lazy, I have a pretty strong visceral reaction to what you say. And I have a pretty strong drive to not ever be considered lazy again. The power of that statement was tremendous, but I think she probably would regret it. And as a parent, I probably wouldn't want to. I would probably try to figure out how to say that differently, just to recognize that there's power in what our words are. So I grant him that, and I recognize it. And I caution people as well from just kind of throwing out random stuff and using the God card as your leverage there. So,
Well, as he went on through this vision, and I had some questions in chapter 10 when he got into the price. So when we get into that, or maybe at the end, I can ask that, because I had a couple of pages that I was really questioning what he was saying there that I didn't totally agree with, and so
and just a caveat. I read this book years ago, and I'm rereading it now, and I don't know if you guys have heard the recent stuff around Andy Stanley that's come about recently, where he made a statement a couple weeks ago in a sermon publicly that just got a huge reaction and repercussion for. I don't know if you've heard this. He said basically to people in his church from the pulpit that if you're a parent of a teen and you're taking them to a small church, you're selfish. You need to take them to a large church where they can get the kind of ministry that they need as teens. And I had a fairly strong reaction to that statement, and it has actually, I think, colored my rereading of this book. So I think I'm a little more critical of Andy Stanley than I might normally have been. But so that might come through in today's lecture. I don't know, because I have a lot of pushback. Even though I like much of what he said, I have a lot of pushback. So thanks, Greg. Let's move on to, hey, Uran, why don't you pick up next, and let's talk about The Vision Has Its Price, chapter 10.
Yeah. All right, hold on here. Pull up my notes. It's just when you mentioned the pushback against Andy Stanley, part of me wonders also maybe it's easy to criticize the book too. He's trying to lay out a vision for visioning.
Yeah, absolutely.
I might wonder, it's easy to poke holes at it too.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, I try to read everything critically
Right.
with a helpful critical approach. And I think that maybe I'm just reacting to Andy Stanley a little bit more than usual. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting statement. I didn't hear about that. So
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah, you can go back and follow it. It's all over the place. He issued a Twitter apology and then an extended apology in an interview, or I don't know, Christianity Today or something. But
Yeah, that's a hard statement if you're the largest church in America. And say, anyways, all right.
Yeah.
So yeah, this chapter is basically, let me see here. Yeah, basically you as the leader, once you have this vision, you have to be the one that really buys into it, sacrifices, gives into. I think he had the example where he was trying to do an additional property building fund, and they're going to do a 4-month campaign, and he was on his heart that he had to give up his own salary during those times to kind of show, all right, I'm committed to this. I have to do something. It reminds me of I heard somewhere like the difference between the ham and the pig and the chicken. What is it? The pig is all in.
The chicken contributes to the meal.
Yeah, right.
But the pig is
all just involved in it, not.
Yeah.
Anyways, it just kind of remind me of that.
That's a great analogy, though. That's fun.
Let's see. You had a couple talking about scuba diving, like parachuting. You're either doing it or you're not. So when you have this vision, you're either in or not, really. And I think your actions and choices that you make reflect that. And so in that chapter was the building block number 9. So don't expect others to take greater risks or make greater sacrifices than you. So he's saying, so basically, if you're the leader and you have this vision, again, you're the one. Don't expect anybody else to necessarily, go above you. But so you gotta lead by example. Let's see here. Yeah, and he made it kind of in the treasure hunt section. Basically, where your heart is, that's where your or where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. And so he's kind of making. So if you really value this, vision, you're really going for it, and your credit card statements, your checkbook's is gonna reflect that. And then he gave another example of Karen, who wanted to start, a children's ministry in the inner city, and she was committed, even despite all the problem, I guess, muggings and staff being beat up and her, kids being murdered, and still she was able to, continue on. But yeah, so I think basically it's, as a leader, you set that bar, I guess. You have to be the one that jumps out of the plane, so to speak.
Yeah, so we pop over to the other side of the room here. I don't know how you guys are looking at this, how you have your thing laid out. You have a speaker view and a grid view, so you can move back and forth between those views if you like. But hey, Eric, talk to us about the other aspect of this chapter. Yoran mostly talked about sacrifice. And the other element here is the element of risk. And maybe with your years of experience at Ventura, I'm sure you guys have done some different things there, where risk has come into play in accomplishing the vision that you've come across there.
I'd have to say, with the 4 chapters of this week, this one is one that resonated with me the most.
Yeah.
And not so much the things that were internal in the church, but the fact that our church has reached out to try and bring the gospel to an unreached, unengaged people group in Nigeria. And, when he starts off, that says, any vision worth pursuing will demand sacrifice and risk. I went, I'm going to like this chapter.
Yeah.
Because 98% of everybody that I talk to says to me, you're going where? Nigeria? That's where Boko Haram is. Da 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 da. Like, that's dangerous. That's risky. And yeah, there's definitely some elements of that, although we try and mitigate as much of that as possible. And for those of you listening, we're on the other side of the country from where they're operating. They're in the northeast. We're operating in the northwest. So there's 300 to 500 miles away. But that doesn't mean anything to people here in America. They don't understand. It's all of Africa for most people is any country in Africa is the same.
Yeah.
We don't have a concept of differentiation between them.
Yeah, I think most people think Africa is a country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when it talked about sacrifice, I understand that I added it up a couple months ago. I think I've spent it's like 4 or 5 months of my life now, 6 months in Africa, in Nigeria. I've never been to any other place in Africa besides Nigeria. That's not very nice, but I'd like to go some other place sometime.
No.
But there's sacrifice. If I just personal sacrifice, from a monetary standpoint, I'm a realtor. I sell houses, and I know over the past 10 years, it's cost me somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 of unearned income that I would have had I been here. And that's not including the cost to go and travel and everything else. So there is cost, and I'm just speaking from personal experience. And there is risk. There's the first couple times I went there, especially the first time, I was like, what am I doing here? I hope I return in one piece. Make sure my insurance policy is paid up. That's the angle I came at this from. And yet, by me going, I've really come to realize that, in the greater scheme of things, it's really not that risky. We in America are so risk adverse. But I now am a huge champion for, getting our high school and middle school kids down to Mexico to serve there, go to Haiti. The odds are all we hear about here in the West is what's reported on the media. We don't realize that, okay, Nigeria is a country of almost 200 million people, just in that country alone, almost 1 billion in the African continent. And okay, yeah, Boko Haram's killed, several tens of thousands. That is a lot, but when you look at the numbers, it's not that big. So yeah, I like the building block number 9. Don't expect others to take greater risks or make greater sacrifices than you have. And I understand that goes to the leader. And yeah, I help lead this project, but I can speak into other projects, speak into other people's lives. And I really feel like I have a great confidence in trusting God because of the, if you want to call it the risks or the sacrifices I've made. I know he'll come through.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a dangerous topic to publicly talk about because immediately you start comparing and, is that really a risk, or how big a risk have you given? Does it match my sacrifice? All of that stuff.
Exactly.
And
all I can do is say, you know what? If I had the opportunity, I would take my kids with me. And that usually puts a perspective on it. Now, I may be more willing to take a risk. I have a higher risk tolerance than most people. I'll leave it at that. Do I think it's a stupid tolerance? No. If I thought it was stupid or not of God and things like that, I wouldn't be doing that. But
yeah. So one comment I want to make about reading a book like this, or reading any book like this, especially if you're in a smaller church. So those of us who are in smaller churches, and compared to Andy Stanley's church, we're all in small churches. So. But what I've discovered over the course of time in going to seminars and reading books is that you have to do the work of analyzing what's transferable to your context and what isn't. And so that's a really important thing to do. I've made the mistake of going to conferences and being discouraged by what people were saying. And then being encouraged inappropriately to do something that was not appropriate to the context that I was in. So it's a lot of work, you have to do exegesis and hermeneutics and reading books as well as reading the Bible. And so, when it's somewhat overwhelming to see or to hear such an incredible thing occur, to raise $1 million in 4 months, that took our church 8 years to do. And I thought that was pretty amazing that we pulled it off in 8 years. And so you read something like that and you could really kind of react and be discouraged by that. I also think the example he used was semi-dangerous too for the rest of us out there in the normal world. And I kind of bristled a little against it because I'm going to hand this book to guys in my congregation and they're going to say, well, he gave up 4 months' salary. And you kind of go, yeah, okay, apples to oranges, right? He didn't divulge what that really meant. And I think that was, if you're going to throw that out there, tell us what that really meant. Because I don't know what that means for Andy Stanley. I know what that means for me, but I don't know what that means for Andy Stanley to have thrown in 4 months' salary. Because I think there's a lot of factors in someone like an Andy Stanley. We're reading a book of his, and he's written many books. So he has alternate forms of income that the pastor of a church of 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, even 1,000 people probably doesn't have. And so it's somewhat, you need to be careful with that, especially if you start throwing yourself on that scale to be able to evaluate what does that mean for Andy Stanley to have done that.
Was he writing books at this time?
But
was he?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm just, you throw that question out there. I'm not sure what that meant for him. And, I think of trying to influence people in casting vision and helping them see what an appropriate sacrifice is and standing up in front of their congregation and saying, this is what we will do. And even if you make it public or not, I at certain points in our life here at the church have done those sorts of things. And I understand his reticence to get up front and do it and say it. There are things that I've done that no one knows. And the way that I've done them, no one knows that I've done them. And it's going to stay that way at some level. That's just the way it's going to be. And so it's that balance between when do I get up in front of the congregation and say, here's what I'm doing as a leadership tool to inspire and to also show that I'm on board with you guys here. I'm doing this with you. And the other, where it's like I'm getting up and look at what I'm doing. That's a fine line. I read that part with a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of, yeah, great story, but I think I could have got the point without it. And I just a cautionary tale, because not so much that I want to undermine what he said or even be critical. I just struggle with how to exegete that back to my context sometimes. And I think some of you might have struggled with that as well. It can be a discouraging thing to hear him say that when you sit down and look at your situation and you go, wow, I should have done something like that, or I could have done, it's a hard one. And I grapple with that, not because I'm not willing to jump all in into something, but just, I beat myself up enough already without that sort of thing kind of hovering over my head. The other thing I really appreciated was, because you really write a book like this, and a lot of us have heard a lot of these different statements before, right? So I imagine time, treasure, talent is a threesome that everyone on this page has heard in some form or fashion when someone's been talking about giving, making sacrifices, whatever it might be, a tithing sermon or a series that we do that. And typically those kinds of statements have a quasi biblical life of their own. It's like, is that in the Bible? It's like the old Puritan statement about, oh gosh, no, I can't remember it. The Puritan work ethic, right? People are often curious as to whether that's actually in the Bible. And one of the statements that I hear quite a bit is, you can't lead people where you haven't gone. And I think that's baloney. I think actually leadership oftentimes is going places where you've never been before and taking people with you. I think that's part and parcel. So I like what he said. I don't know what page it's on, but it's in that chapter 10. You cannot lead people any further than you are willing to go yourself. I thought that was a great amendment to that kind of statement that rattles around a lot. But sometimes leadership is going down a path you've never been before, and sometimes that means taking people down a path you've never been before as well. And so sometimes we grow together that way. All right, so thanks, Yaran, Eric, for input on chapter 10. Let's look at chapter 11, warding off criticism. And hey, Jerry, you're in the center there of my screen, so I'll go to you. Talk to us about the chapter on warding off criticism.
Okay. I sure wanted to get in on 10 though, because I think you're right. I think he did go out of line a couple of places in my opinion there, but he's all and then he comes right back into the like sacrificing for your vision. I think that anybody who has a vision that is God ordained is going to end up sacrificing something. Well, one thing he said late in chapter 10 was your vision has not truly captured your heart until it captures your wallet. I don't agree with that at all. I don't think just because God's given you a vision that's going to cost you anything monetarily. But anyway, all right, so chapter 11. I think he was right on in the beginning here. Visions are easy to criticize because for the most part, it's a vision that God has given just to you. Maybe there are others around you that have similar types, or people in the world who have similar types, but it's a personal, at least in my case, it's a personal vision for me. And if I were to, because there are parts of it that I haven't opened up to anybody about, and if I did, I know that the criticism would be there. Not that that would change anything in me. It's just that I think that right now it's better that I leave part of that on the table. And he says they attract criticism. Partially it's because you're saying that God has specifically, essentially spoken to you and given you you and only you that particular thing to do in that particular direction, and who are you? So that can come out of that. And he also says visions are difficult to defend against criticism, because what do you have to say? Well, God gave it to me. Oh, that's a pretty easy thing to dissect and start dissecting and come at you in that way. And then it says visions often die at the hands of the critics. Now I think he's got to be talking about only those that are really not God ordained, because if they're God ordained, God's not going to let it fall to the critics. He'll if you rely on God, and that's something in chapters 9 and 10 both that I kept making little notes. Well, rely on God. If it's if you need courage and wisdom, go to God for those things on how to get your vision to become the reality that He wants it to be. But I also so we start talking about change, and your vision would probably bring change to people that it's going to affect. And I think he's right that people are not, people generally speaking are not open to just blanket change. And since they don't have your vision, more than likely, then bringing out an effort to convince them that vision is good for them, even though it's going to put them through changes, that's a difficult spot to be in. The gaps, that's another place where it's easy to criticize a vision. In my particular case, there's been a gap of time that has gone by that even made me question the vision. But God, I went to God, and he just reaffirmed everything in me, so that I came back. But there's gaps in time. There can be in visions, and it's just like treading water during that time, almost just waiting for God. So that's pretty much what I got out of chapter 11. I didn't really agree very much with his death of a vision. I once again, I think that if it's from God, that He'll find a way to get you through the roadblocks, the criticism, He'll give you the faith you need. So.
All right, thanks, Gary. Hey, Clint, why don't you chime in here as well? I imagine because of the nature of your ministry, you have received your own fair share of criticism.
Oh, yeah. So criticism, I think
even Stanley took a shot at you, right? With that one guy who had a vision, and then he decided to go out and have a beer instead.
Yeah, the poor guy. I was kind of cracking up with that. Concerning Stanley and stuff, it really was a bummer to hear him say that stuff. I do appreciate his apologies coming out and redacting his statements and stuff and context and all that and with people and stuff. And I appreciate that. It's pretty bold. I don't see that too often, as well as guys that kind of walk on that stage. So I was thankful for that. But concerning like that, yeah, I get a lot of critics within and with outside of Christianity. But outside, not as much. People appreciate and actually they come and they actually embrace me, and that's the world I think that God's pretty much clear has told me to go live in. As far as those within Christendom that disagree with how I do things, whatever, I'm not too worried about them. They already know the things of God and they feel confident in who they are. So, but and even when they come after me, whatever, I always invite them over for lunch and a soda, not a beer. So we see how that goes. As far in criticism, I expect it, and I think anybody that that's going to move forward on the vision that God's given to not expect criticism and not know how to deal with it, I think isn't good. The one things that he called for is you must be in prayer and best get that vision down and make sure that it's aligned well with who God is, and then move forward. And even the criticisms that are coming at him, whatever to say, some of those you don't even have to answer because they're not even relevant. So yeah, that's kind of where I sit on that. But I do expect criticism to come anytime we make a move, that there's going to be risk. There's going to be risk to relationship, risk to your pocketbook. There's going to be risk in that. And I think all that's true. I think that when God tells you to do something, it's going to affect your pocketbook. It will affect your relationships. It will affect those, how you live, where you live. It'll affect your kids. And it may hurt and it may sting. It's not saying that, and I assume that it's going to be that way, whether it's going to be a thorn in the flesh or it's going to be something, someone's going to come after you in some way just to derail. And, whether that's of the demonic or if that's someone that just doesn't like you, with a discern between that as well. I think on 11, if you do, it said, don't expect others to take greater risks than you make. I understand what you're saying on going up front. I have a hard time when guys go up there, especially when you said, 4 months of Andy's standing salary may be my salary for a year. I understand the concept, and I think it's great that he's able to do it. But yeah, how he's putting it out there is interesting. So I appreciate the overall thought in this book and where he's pushed us forward to put vision down and what to expect. And overall, the great points are there. When we get into the depth of it each, I think he lives in a churched life, and I don't think he gets out often. So I don't think that I think he doesn't spend time with people out in the streets, and I don't think he spends time with people. I think he's got the one-off stories from the people that he's empowered and made back up because he's been in that position. But I don't think he's been on a street corner in a while. So
he needs to come have a beer with you.
It would be great, and I remember even someone asked me, one of the guys I enjoyed reading or listening to was, I used to enjoy listening to Charles Stanley, and people said, you do? And I go, it just, to me, it was something different, that I enjoyed a different perspective. And it kind of helped me just kind of my theology. So I appreciated that a lot. So I don't know if you got any specific questions for me. I'm just trying to go through it. But
Yeah, no, I just wanted to get your perspective. I think some of his points in here in this chapter are really, really good. Getting us back to a place where, when you do get criticism, that you make sure and come back and refine. Inviting everybody into the room.
Yeah, I got a party of 12 walking. Hi guys, and they're all like, "Hey, what are you doing?" They're talking to me. So. Steve Bagman says hi. So
right on. I do. I say hi to all of them. I say Godspeed, the Lord bless you.
Hear, hear.
So I mean that whole process of I think criticism is a helpful and a necessary tool. I think we don't like it, and sometimes it's totally specious and out of place. But criticism helps us stay on beam, and it actually helps us to refine. I think it's one of those things that can be helpful. You can either just react against it and be defensive, or you can use it for the positive tool that it needs to be and can be. Oftentimes, I think people will criticize and they just want to be critical, and you'll never gain anything in terms of relationship with them. They'll probably just move on because you're not going to respond to their criticism well ever at all. But I don't know that that's everyone. I think Most times that I get criticism, people are genuine in their concerns, and oftentimes if you listen, you can actually gain something from the criticism and help actually move forward and refine. In fact, that's, I think, how community works. I don't know that we want Stepford churches, right? You want community, and community is based on an open and free exchange of lots of things, including ideas and direction and decisions. So part of the leadership dynamic is learning how to deal with criticism. I imagine for you, Clint, much of the criticism that you get is a learning opportunity for people who give you criticism. Like, what in the world are you doing? How could you possibly consider that to be a Christian venture? And, being able to challenge people back to a place of the street corner and being in the middle of people's lives is a positive thing. So I imagine you've had Jesus moments like that, right?
Tons. I mean, the people that come through, a pastor came at me probably a couple months ago, said, I hate your sign and I hate what you do. And he walked right past me. And I said, hey, do you have a second? And he said, why? And I said, well, you just made a statement without even having a conversation with me. You want to sit down and actually talk about it, or are you just going to make a statement? And he goes, no, I might be able to talk to you about it. So he actually went to the bathroom in the restaurant, came back, and he goes, okay, I got time for you now. And so I put down everything I said. I said, shoot away. And he came at me with everything. He said, I disagree with how you drink beer. I disagree with the people you meet in your pub. I disagree with, I go, I thank you for your criticism. I go, and I thank you for that you wanted to say that. But I'm also in here able to meet people right where they're at. And the conversations they have, whether it's over a soda or if it's over a beer, I go, are good. And people they don't have their guard up. They're not walking in on a Sunday morning in their Sunday best. They're actually coming as a normal human being the other 6 days of their life. And when they say the F word or they say something that's inappropriate or whatever that maybe wouldn't go good, it's my job to receive them. I go, I wouldn't just be off put by them. So you may disagree with how I do things with a beer. That's fine. I go, but if there's not fruit, and then there's not people getting married in here, and I'm not doing funerals, and people aren't getting baptized through here, and I'm not creating friendships, then you have every right to come at me. And I'd expect you to have more ammo and more people saying, hey, Clint, you're not doing it correct. But it's far outweighed. So, and I got people similar like Eric, Bauckham here, I mean, there's different people that, hey, Clint, I saw you, or I thought this, whatever. You may need to check yourself. And I'm like, oh, okay, I need to check myself then, and I take that, and I have people around me to make sure that I don't go far left wing, whatever, and all of a sudden I'm getting hammered and my shirt's off at noon on a Thursday at the pub. So,
yeah, good.
Yeah,
don't do that.
Maybe next class.
Right. Alex and Paul, you guys have chapter 12 on alignment. I thought this was a great chapter, frankly. The issue of being a good team member. What did you take away from this? Alex, we'll start with you and let Paul bring us to the conclusion. As long as you're feeling up to it, Alex, I hope you are.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah. Where was I? I lost my thought. Chapter 12, right?
Right.
Excuse me. Just one, if I might, just one quick comment about his $1 million fundraising thing. That whole part of that book made me want to throw up, literally. It's one thing to be in a church that you can say, you can relate it to Six Flags Over Jesus compared to like your church, a small church, and what you're experiencing compared to even the area that their church is in. It just, it really was a bad taste in my mouth,
Yeah, I would encourage you to try and see through that to some of the stuff. There's transferable ideas there that are good.
Yeah.
You want to pull them.
Yeah. After I got over being nauseated by it, I was able to bring my telescope back and look at the whole picture of it and why he had to share it and stuff. But it's okay. I got over it and realized it's just what he's writing down. What was so important to them was part of the vision discussion that we're having. So anyhow, chapter 12 was alignment, having your team in alignment. The thing he used with the automotive thing was mostly workable, really. I mean, having your vehicle in proper alignment makes a world of difference in how it handles, how you can get to some place to another, and the safety factor. So when he used that, after reading through that, I was able to understand how important it is and what happens in a group environment with your team. He mentions that misalignments just happens over normal wear and tear on a vehicle. And I think that's pretty applicable to a team environment, wherever, work or church or social gatherings, that after a while, some of the things he mentions, people do get bored. Different opinions start cropping up, and the human factor of the alignment starts to show its face. But it's important, I think he brought it up. It's important to be aware of that it will happen eventually, whether it happens through just normal wear and tear, during your normal time frame, or like he called it, bumps, which, like a major bump in the road, you whack it real bad, you think, wow, my car's handling. Bumps in the church environment would obviously be could be a major crisis, a loss of somebody in high position, or the trouble with the worship team, or any of that. You know what I'm talking about. That could happen and turn things really around really fast, like he did say, could do it overnight. And I've seen it actually happen midway through a day. So I think the biggest factor was on page 169, that he wrote out locating the problem, and he listed five issues that most of them I related to and am relating to currently in my current stage in life. And I got to be honest with you, this whole visioneering thing has really threw me back to a larger issue. Even this class that we're taking now about leadership has really thrown me back into a depressive state of what has taken place in my vision for my life. And it just, everything that he brings out is another reminder of where my dream currently is, my vision for my life and for Angie. But the things that he wrote on page 169, I think this past week came to a head, and I was examining where I'm at and what was going on. It's like, it just really, it's really discouraging at this point, but I'm glad I read it. So I was able to put a tag on what Angie and I have been experiencing of late. So, he gives insight that I'm not unfamiliar with, but I think for the last almost 17 years, I've been trying to not ignore, but just trying to push it off and leave it on the shelf. So I think at this point in my life, this particular book, his opinions and stuff have relevance in my life personally, and Angie's too, and to what decisions we're going to have to make before too long. So, and his take with Nehemiah and stuff is a good relation. I've read Nehemiah and his stuff a couple of times, and interestingly enough, I listening to a couple pastors, and they're both using Nehemiah for different discussions that they're having, but it is one individual's actually using it as a vision, how to visualize or transfer your vision to your church, and he's using Nehemiah too. So it's I find it curious that we're reading about Nehemiah and then others, and I'm getting it from other outdoor sources, you might say, other than the class. So I think the Lord has something there, a message that I'm supposed to be paying attention to. So it was a very short one, so I don't know how much you want me to pull out of it without leaving Paul dangling. But I would like to say that there is one thing that really struck me the most, and I'm going to have to go back a chapter if I can share that with you real quick, that ties in with this whole vision thing, what I'm suffering with right now and struggling with, and what I'm realizing is on page, he talks about Jane's story back in chapter probably 9, something like that. Anyhow, on page 120 at the very top, someone exactly like Jane defined the glowing embers of life and fanned them into preferred future. I wrote on the other page, I said, I would like to be able to do this in lives of broken believers, but only under the influence and guidance of the Holy Spirit. And really that is the basis or the framework in this vehicle of my vision for my life, where it's really come to focus over the past 17 years. And Angie too, is that some are engaged in outreach, like Eric's, in what he's doing. Other people are engaged in other outreaches in the churches. But for me, I think my life, my calling is that to broken believers and being a shepherd in that arena. If that includes a pastorship, then that's fine too. I don't know about that, but in light of what I wrote and what we're going through and stuff, it really, chapter 12 really kind of put it in the head is to be realigned in what our calling is, to examine where the parts, like in a vehicle, need to be either replaced or realigned. So it's a struggle. I'm not going to color code it, but it's really, really tough for me right now in this stage of my life, going through this whole particular class of leadership, and then conversely in this particular book of visioneering. It's really opened up some serious wounds and gashing and particulars in our lives. So I don't know if that's helpful for chapter 12, but that's where we are. Are you there? I lost you. You're muted, Steve.
I'm sure that everybody in the class would be happy to commit to pray for you through this season. I sent you a private message as well. I'd love to get together with you, Alex, sometime and just kind of hear your story and listen to your period of discouragement. So let's try and do that. I'd love to do that with you.
Sure, that would be awesome.
Right.
My schedule is mostly free, so it depends on yours.
All right. Well, I'll touch base with you outside of the class, and we'll work something out for that. How's that?
Sure, that'd be great.
Thanks, Alex. All right, Paul. Talk to us. Leave us with some words of wisdom.
That's a tall order, but I'll do my best.
Come on now.
Okay, so just going from that to this, I just marked a couple of notes. Time. It's just the fact of team life. It's not necessarily anybody's fault that these things happen. It talks about a time to act. God had not called him to Jerusalem to fix everything. We can't fix everybody. We're really big at this church about, hey guys, let's not go into this situation. Okay, don't fix anybody. Okay, everybody promise each other we're not going to fix anybody, okay? We're just going to do the work, what we came here to do. Let's stick to the goal. And I think that's important to stay on focus of your vision. It also talks about, it's okay to have problems in taking action. It is not okay to ignore them. Alignment problems are a fact of life for these organizations and families. How big they become will be determined by our willingness to address them. These are just words like he's putting it on paper, but it's just like that thing when you came home and you threw your backpack down and you kind of just had your shoulders shrugged and you fell on the couch and mom looked at you and said, boy, what's wrong? What happened today? Because she stopped you right then and there and she saw a screw in the wheel coming out of alignment. She saw something wrong with her boy. So she's going to correct that right away because it's crucial for her team, her family team to operate and produce fruit, as we spoke about. So these things happen. They rarely work themselves out. If mom was to ignore Junior sitting there, maybe he'll get over it eventually, but I don't want Junior to stir in it. I know how it is to be young. So I'm going to correct Junior real quick and I'm going to lift him up. Because that's what we do as a family, as it speaks as a family, as a church, in all these organizations, in the corporate model, in a marriage, in the workplace. I find myself lifting up people constantly on a daily. I believe that's what we are called to do. The longer we wait, the more complicated things become. I really liked it on page 173, how it says, and I'm going to read it word for word because this is exactly what happens if you let things go. When it appears things have worked themselves out, it is usually a case of a problem going underground. Okay, yeah, it's been quiet for a while. Hey, I think it's passed, no issue. She hasn't said anything in a week. I think we're good. No, not at all. The next time it surfaces, there are more people involved and more issues to resolve. I thought Katie was on board, but no, Katie and Mary Lou got together and now they both feel the same way that Mary Lou felt because Mary Lou went underground and they spoke together and they gossiped outside the church and now they've created a clique, if you will, that we call them, and it's derailing our team. There's too much at stake to allow alignment issues to go uncorrected. We need to take action. I loved this chapter as far as alignment. And I loved how the author went to each different facade of an organization. I mean, each different, type of unity you would see again in family, in the workplace, and all, because you can relate all this to all that. And the part about locating the problem, yeah, that really can center your chi, if you will. It really just it centers your focus on the issue. Bad choice of word, but no. But no, I really enjoyed this chapter on the time to act and taking action. We're really big on just teamwork right now and having meetings about meetings. Let's have a meeting about that meeting right now, just to talk about what we're going to talk about at the meeting. I really feel the importance of that now. I didn't when I was younger, and when I didn't have anything to share. But now that, you feel your influence and you want others' influence on you as well. And you want that accountability. I think it's important that we all take action together and then we all just pray about it and we all can meet together to get back in alignment and become fruitful for the bigger picture, not just ourselves, but more for the bigger picture of what we came here to do and what we actually want to do. So I'm sorry, I don't know if that was wisdom, but I really liked the taking action part and the time, because it really seems like this author is really all about time. And just to let you know, like reading these last couple of chapters has really put my vision into a little bit better of a focus for me. As far as, hey, that is what I'm doing. That is the direction I'm moving in. And yes, I do need to do this. You're absolutely right. To where I've actually even stepped back from my 9-to-5 job that I do and a step out of faith. And I'm taking a hit financially, but hey, it's all good. you know, because the Lord's got me. And you know, he already proved he's had, because on the 4-day work schedule I have now, I worked an 11-hour shift yesterday. So, I mean, I'm not missing anything. You know, God finds a way to make sure I'm taken care of anyway. So, you know, take that leap of faith, right? Let's do it. Let's get the work done. Why not?
Thanks, Paul.
Oh, yeah.
All right. All right. So next week we meet in person. We'll be 5 o'clock in Phelan at Phelan Community Church, and we'll be as early as we can at the pub. So I think we're shooting for 10:30ish, realizing that there's a staff meeting at Ventura that kind of heads right up to about then. But I'll be there at 10:30, and we'll get in as much as we can. All right. Thanks, guys. There will be a lecture posted on Thursday, and you want to make some time for this. I'm excited about this lecture, or this interview with Tom DeVries. He is the president of the Reformed Church of America, and I think you'll enjoy Tom, and I think he'll have a lot of good things for us with regards to leadership. So that will be posted on Thursday. I'm interviewing him in the morning, and so it should be up by mid to late afternoon as I look at my schedule for Thursday. So that's my plan. So look for that lecture this week, Thursday or so. All right? Look forward to seeing you guys.
Steve.
Thank you, Steve.